What's up, interpreters? I'm Scott Vierick. I'm a senior historian and interpretive planner at History Associates Incorporated.
What's up, interpreters? I'm Halley Fehner. I'm a freelance interpretive planner and exhibit scriptwriter.
What's up, interpreters? I'm Heather Manier, Corporate Engagement and Partnerships Manager for NAI.
And what's up, interpreters? I am Song, your events and engagement manager with NAI, and welcome to our podcast. We are so excited to have both Scott and Halley with us here today, talking about interpretive planning. We just came off of a national conference in Little Rock, and I will tell you that interpretive planning sessions were some of the best attended sessions of the whole conference. Obviously, it's a hot topic, but I'm not sure that everybody knows exactly what interpretive planning is. So do you guys kind of want to give us like a quick 101 on what exactly is interpretive planning?
I would say on a very basic level, interpretive planning is part of strategic planning. And, when we work with sites on developing an interpretive plan, we're working with people that are so busy, running the site, coming up with their interpretive programs, doing all of the day-to-day management. So interpretive planning is really a chance to take a step back and kind of look holistically at your interpretive program. So, thinking about your overall goals for your interpretive program, thinking about your different sort of themes and whether they're still serving your purpose, and then kind of developing a game plan for the future, coming up with recommendations for what you want to do both with personal and non-personal media, and then coming up with how to implement those in sort of the next 5 to 10 years usually.
You answered my question. I was wondering how far out you plan, but it probably depends on
it varies on the site. I mean, I've worked on plans where it's like they say it's going to be a 5-year plan, but then you look at a previous plan that has been done for that site and they haven't done anything in 15 years, and some of the things haven't been totally checked off. So sometimes it's, when people get the chance to do it.
Right. And it's a process that involves engagement, not only from the people actually writing the plan, but from staff members, volunteers, stakeholders, community members. So it's a process that can take time, but it's absolutely one that's worth doing.
Right. Partnerships are super important with this, right? I mean, and some exhibits or interpretive plans more than others. Do you have an interpretive plan that you can remember that was particularly challenging?
I mean, I think they're all challenging in their own way. And I'm trying to think of a good example.
I recently did one for Appomattox Courthouse, and the plan itself went beautifully. And the client team was great. But the subject matter was kind of tricky on that, right? Trying to navigate how to talk about the Civil War and just kind of with everything going on. And the park really wants to, push that. And so one of the things that we did is we had a historians roundtable with sort of subject matter experts coming in. And that was sort of a unique aspect of that plan, because it was sort of working with outside academic partners. And one of the things that came out of that is even just categorizing the site as not just like it's not really like Lee's surrender, it's Grant's victory, which kind of totally blew my mind in a certain way, because that's how they always talk about Appomattox, is the surrender site. So that was, I don't know, that was just sort of an interesting framework that.
Well, and that's been around. I mean, I visited that when I was a kid. So they've had interpretation there for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd say one that had some unique challenges was we did a project a couple years ago for the Virginia Beach History Museums, and they had 3 historic houses. And the goal of this whole process, the reason they hired us, was that these houses were known as hidden treasures, and that people in the know knew them, loved their programs. But so many people just had no idea. They went to Virginia Beach, for the recreational opportunities near the waterfront. And so part of the process was figuring out, all right, how can we tie in what these houses are doing to kind of the broader community, this broader, not just the local community, but also all the tourists who were coming through. And also, how do we make sure that the stories of the houses are connected, but that each one has its own unique offering, has its own unique reason to visit, has its own unique stories to tell. So it was really about trying to achieve that balance of what's the connective tissue, but also what makes each house special? What's the reason to visit each one?
So you guys brought up a topic that is, well, it's a hot topic. It should be a topic, but of more of like inclusive storytelling.
Mhm.
In that civil rights example that you gave. Are you seeing trends leading toward more inclusivity of involving community from maybe marginalized communities, or telling the, in quotes, the whole story or the true story in your planning?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, 100%. So yeah, whether that's working with descendants of people who may have been enslaved at a place, whether it's working with indigenous nations connected with a site, you're seeing a lot more of that. I will say that the interpretive planning process is not the place to start that outreach. That outreach really needs to start before that happens. So that's something that a lot of the sites that we're working with, they've been really on the ball about making sure that these conversations start beforehand. And then those conversations continue as part of the planning process. So that's definitely something we're seeing. We're also seeing a lot more interest in research to make sure that the information presented tells the broader story, that the scholarship is up to date, that it's accurate, because that's really critical, especially if somebody's doing frontline interpretation of a complicated topic. You don't want to just kind of push them out there and have them give a talk. You need to give them all the resources available so that they can create an engaging program. And if they're challenged on any of the facts, they can respond with, well, here's what we know. Here's the sources we used. Here's the information we have, so that the visitor is aware that, hey, we're not making this up. This is grounded in scholarship. This is grounded in sources. And this is why we're saying it.
Right, absolutely. I find that even walking around like my local zoo, I see people listening to a program and then on their phones Googling it, to be like, oh, is there really only 40 emer leopards in the world? So people do fact check themselves on, just online. So I think that that is a really important aspect to get all of that correct.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, visitors, they ask questions. They want, and meant, some visitors are looking for a fight, and, that's something you deal with. But many visitors, they want to know. They want to know how you came about to your conclusions, how you came about to the information in your program. So your example of the visitors Googling on their phone, that's a perfect example. It doesn't mean they don't trust you. It just means that they're interested in getting more to the story. So that's a sign that interpretation is doing its work. But at the same time, you also need to have that information as well, so that if the visitor does ask the interpreter directly, the interpreter can respond appropriately.
When we're talking about inclusivity, we're also talking about disabled visitors, right? And accessibility. Do you see that as much as other types of diversity when you're planning? Do you see the need or the want for that when you start an interpretive plan?
Yeah, it's a really big consideration. I mean, Scott and I both work a lot with the Park Service, and that's a huge mission for them. But yeah, just kind of consider, especially with historic sites, it's a challenge sometimes because you're working with a historic house and maybe you can't add an elevator. So how do you make sure that a person who is in a wheelchair can get a sense of what the second floor might look like? Or do you decide, we're not going to have visitors go up to the second floor. We're going to keep everybody on the first floor, and that's the experience. And those are things you just really have to work out with the site, and kind of thinking about both access, but then kind of what the park can manage from their day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll also say that interpretive planning, that's a part of the conversation, but it can't be the whole conversation. So with my clients, we'll have these conversations about accessibility, but I will freely admit I am not an expert on how to provide accessibility in every situation, in every aspect of a site. So I encourage my clients to work with specialists in the area, work with communities that represent people who have accessibility needs, so that those voices are being heard, that expertise is being utilized. We're also seeing a lot of how can digital interpretation promote accessibility, not only in terms of access to places that people with mobility needs might not be able to reach, but also in terms of places that are out of the way for a lot of people. So I'm working with a site up in Alaska, and this particular park, there's no roads to it. So if you want to get to the park, you either got to take a boat in or you need to fly in on a seaplane. And just right there, if you're living in the continental United States and you want to get up to Alaska, that's that's a significant effort. And then you need to do even more effort to get to this place. So the site in question, they do a lot in terms of digital interpretation so that somebody who is never going to get up there in person, they can still learn about it. They can still form meaningful connections. They can still understand why this place is important, why it needs support, why it needs protection, and why they should be invested in it.
I'm assuming you saw a big uptick in that type of interpretation during the pandemic in 2020. Are you seeing that sites are continuing to extend themselves into the digital world for the reasons that you just said, Scott? People can't get up there, or it's either cost prohibitive or just physically really, really challenging. Are you finding that these sites are continuing to put money and effort into that type of interpretation?
Absolutely. And there's been a lot of research on just how important the digital presence is in terms of just getting on a visitor's radar. I forget who said it, but somebody made the point, and I 100% agree that for so many, I'd argue even most visitors, the visit doesn't begin when you pull into a parking lot. It begins when you Google the name of the site. So having that digital presence, it's helpful for providing interpretation for people who can't get to a site, who can't access the site. It's also just helpful in attracting that potential visitor and saying, hey, here's what we are, here's what we do, here's our mission, here's what we offer. And so it's a way to kind of communicate to that visitor, encourage them to come, and then after they leave, encourage them to continue. So whether that's a digital tour, whether that's a social media presence, all those forms of digital engagement, they meet multiple needs.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting coming back from the pandemic right now, because we're seeing, this kind of people want to get back to the real thing, right? It's like there's this push-pull between what do you want to invest in your digital resources, and what do you invest on the ground for those visitors that are there to see the real thing. But it's interesting, like how much the pandemic's like skewed all the visitor data and just like all the things that you use in interpretive planning to sort of be like, okay, here's where our baseline is. Like everybody's baseline is totally screwed up from the last 5 years, which has made planning kind of interesting, because what people were really gravitating towards in the pandemic are not like what people are gravitating towards now, in terms of what, not necessarily the types of experiences that they're looking for. So it's kind of an interesting time.
Mm-hmm.
And even expectations, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
like you're saying, Scott, going online and Googling that place to see, can you just not go anymore? Can you just look virtually and not actually have to go anymore? When you were talking about the place in Alaska, so you're creating an interpretive plan for this park, and then do you work with like drones and things like that to capture pictures? Like what types of resources do you use to make sure that people who can't get there might be able to experience these remote places?
Sure. So the approach is going to be different for every site. So me personally, I'm not flying any drones, although that does sound fun. That is something that hasn't come up yet for this park, but there is another site that I worked with not too long ago that was out in Colorado. And working with the indigenous tribes connected to that site, they expressed the need for more imagery of it so that members of the tribe who were not living nearby this site could still see it, could still have access to it. So in that instance, yeah, aerial photography was one of the recommendations in the interpretive plan. Again, there's no one size fit all for every site, but in that particular instance, it made sense based on the feedback we got from our indigenous partners on that project.
All right, shifting gears just a little bit now. So you definitely help interpreters and organizations with their interpretive programming from a holistic standpoint, anything from like, hey, we're completely redoing the pathway at this botanical garden to, new exhibit design content. How much non-personal interpretation versus the personal interpretation do you work with as far as, coming in as a consultant? Do you do both, or is it mostly the non-personal?
For me, mostly non-personal.
Yeah, I'd say the same for me too. We tend to do a lot if we are commissioned to create an interpretive product. We have done like some recommendations for like tour scripts and tour outlines, but we tend to be hired more often for, hey, we've got an exhibit panel here. What text should go there? Or like, where should waysides go? We want to create an online timeline. We want to create an online exhibit. So we tend to be hired more to do the non-personal interpretive forms as opposed to creating personal interpretation programs. Typically, in the interpretive planning works we do, we'll make recommendations about personnel interpretation, but we're not the ones actually developing it in most cases.
Yeah. And Scott, you've done personal interpretation.
I have, yeah. No,
Yeah.
for many years, I was a park ranger at Harpers Ferry National Historical Park. I also was a tour guide for many years at Mount Vernon, and I was briefly an educator at the White House Historical Association.
All right, so Scott, you definitely know your stuff.
Very cool.
I
That's
try,
also,
I try.
that's like a perfect segue because, we are trying to diversify the field. It tends to be very white middle class. Our organization is more than 50%, middle class women, a lot of white women. And so we're trying to diversify. That's been a goal of ours. We have a JEDI mission: justice, equity, diversity, accessibility, and inclusion. And so as we try to diversify, we talk to people, young people especially, about all the different ways they can get into interpretation, right? And History Associates does a lot of different stuff. I mean, corporations, legal, museums, you have all these things on your website. Scott, how did you get into sort of from being a frontline interpreter to a different type, still being in the field, but really from a totally different angle?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting story. So the whole field of history consulting, I had no idea existed until maybe about a year or so before I applied. When I was interning at Harpers Ferry, one of the rangers there applied for a job at History Associates. He ended up not getting it, and this was a guy who has gone on since then to write books, to win awards. So like he's done very well for himself. But him mentioning that he had a job application there was how it got onto my radar. And then I graduated. I was doing various part-time jobs, doing kind of the frontline interpretation. And one day I saw that History Associates was hiring, and I'm like, well, if they didn't hire, so-and-so, there's no way they're hiring me, but I'll throw in a resume. I'll see what happens.
And what were they hiring for? What was the job?
Yeah, it was a research historian. So that's
Okay.
kind of our entry level in the organization. And when you first get hired, you're typically hired as a historian or an archivist. But as a kind of a entry level historian, you're going to be doing kind of everything that the history side does. So I applied for that. I got an interview. Halley was one of my interviewers. And I must have done a pretty okay job because I got a job offer and started there at the end of 2015. And I've been there ever since.
I like to say that was my greatest contribution to History Associates, was hiring Scott.
How about you, Halley? What is your, I mean, we know what your role is. Well,
Yeah. So
but...
yeah, I was at History Associates for, gosh, like 11, 12 years. So I had a similar path to Scott. I was hired right out of undergraduate as a research historian and kind of did every different kind of research, really learned how to research. I didn't have an interpreter's background. So I find like people that do personal interpretation, I find them so impressive. I could never do what they do because I think first and foremost, I'm really a writer. So yeah, and so I kind of gravitated towards the museum field and interpretation at History Associates and left right around the pandemic and kind of have been doing this on my own now, but really focusing in on kind of mostly exhibit development and exhibit script writing.
What is your favorite thing about your job?
I mean, I think this job is so cool. I really think it's like such a cool field. I get to work with so many cool organizations. And for me, it's like I get to learn about so many different things. I'm not a subject matter expert in anything, but it's great to be able to, come and work with people that really know everything about a site and then kind of pull that information from them and distill it and say, here's what the most important things are. So in a way, it almost helps that I don't know everything because it kind of, what is really important rises to the surface, but it's so fun to get to learn about all these different things. I've learned so many different things through this work.
Yeah, no, I'll echo that. Just the variety of clients I've had the privilege of working with. It's just been amazing. And I've gotten to travel all over the country, got to go down to the Florida Everglades, got to go up to Alaska. just incredible experiences, and just working with people who are so passionate about the work that they do. They care so much about these sites. And just, even in my short time in the field, just seeing how the field has evolved, and, seeing the innovative ways of that people have worked on to better tell these stories, the outreach, the partnerships that are happening these days. It's been really incredible to see. And it's given me a chance to really just see so much incredible work that's happening, not just in the museum and the historic sites fields, but also with some of the nonprofits that we work with in terms of telling their histories and their stories, and the great work that they're doing. And, just knowing that I got to play a very small part of that, it's a really cool feeling.
That's awesome.
I have a question. How did you find NAI? Like, because again, you do so much, and kind of curious how you came, because really what I'm kind of wondering for all the other small, like, interpretive planners and small businesses, how do you find your work? Or how does that work find you? And then it made me think maybe some of that is through NAI, but then how did you find NAI?
That's like my big PSA announcement, is like, get certified, because it really helps your career. That is actually, I don't have a website or anything, but people find me through NAI.
And
because
you're
I
a
think
consultant for History Associates, is that right?
I was, but now I'm freelance. I mean, I guess, like, when you go to the database and you look by state, it's like, if you're trying to find an interpretive planner in Maryland, you're going to find like me and Scott and maybe one or two other people. So
We cornered the market.
yeah,
Good job.
definitely get certified. You learn a lot, obviously, and both Scott and I took the process of interpretive planning course, and that was really helpful. Both of us came to this through the history route. We were both history majors, and so we were very much into the field of research, but then kind of found ourselves gravitating towards interpretation in museums. And I don't know exactly how I found an AI. I mean, I guess just being in the field and talking to people. And
yeah. So you're a certified interpretive planner.
Yes, both of us are.
Both of you are. Gotcha.
Yeah, and my story is much less fun. When I got hired, Halley had just gotten certified, so I was seeing all this going out that Halley now certified interpretive planner. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And like,
you're like, I want to be that.
at that point, I probably didn't even know what interpretive planning was. And then a couple years down the line, it was like, you know what, this is interesting. I want to get more into that. And then Halley left to form her own business. And the company was like, hey, Scott, want to get certified? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And so, as we say, the rest is history. Most people tend to find history associates. It's a mixture of, we'll respond to RFPs, particularly from government clients. But a number of people will find us through our website, and they will reach out through there. So it's a mixture of how we get work.
The America 250, big deal coming up soon. Are you guys working on a ton of stuff for that specifically with your clients?
I have 2 Revolutionary War museum projects that, they obviously want to have done by 2026. So yeah, it's exciting to be doing this. Like, I remember when we were doing the Civil War sesquicentennial interpretation, and there was so much Civil War stuff. So it's cool to see the Revolutionary War content come around, which I've known a lot less about. So getting to dig into, some of that content has been really interesting.
And I'm working with a tavern museum up in New Jersey, and they're obviously really prepping for the 250th. So that's a huge part of the conversations we're having as part of the planning process. And then I believe that a previous interpretive plan I did for the Princeton battlefield, I believe that some of the funds coming available as part of America 250th are being used to help make some of those recommendations a reality. So it's an exciting time. I imagine there's going to be more and more work relating to that as we get closer to that anniversary. Outside of History Associates, I'm on the board of the Alexandria Historical Society in Alexandria, Virginia, and I'm also on the city's Archaeology Commission. And both of those organizations are also really gearing up for that and thinking about, how are we going to approach this? What options are we going to pursue? So it's something that we're seeing a lot of places look at. It seems that more and more grant funding relating to that is coming up, which is really exciting for so many historic sites even those who don't necessarily see themselves as having a connection to the American Revolution, kind of the focus of America 250th of, no, it's what was happening throughout what would become the United States in the 18th century. That's all relevant. So, a site in Colorado, George Washington might not have visited there, but there was still history happening there. There's still relevant history happening there. So that's been really exciting to see. And so I'm excited to see how this continues to develop.
Yeah, one of the museums I'm working with right now, it's in Indiana, and it's like about the Revolutionary War frontier. And it's like living on the East Coast, I had no idea that there was any fighting out there. It's a really cool to be kind of working in this field at this time.
And Halley, what's the name of your company? Just because I feel like we talked about History Associates. Do you have a name for your
I
company?
don't have a name.
You
I
don't?
just
Okay.
operate under my own name.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like we said History Associates a million times, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah, that's cool. I feel close to History Associates too. I worked there for a long time.
You gotta come up with a name, Halley. Come on.
Halley, we need a
I
name.
know.
Okay,
I never
anybody
did.
who's listening, toss in names for Halley.
Yeah, name my company, everyone.
Name the company.
It could be a whole like NAI competition at the next.
Oh, so fun.
Oh yeah, you better be careful what you ask for, huh?
Yeah, right?
All the
End up with,
millions who are listening.
like that Bodie McBoat face. You guys remember that?
Oh, there you go. Consulting face.
Yeah, great.
One of the last exhibit projects that Halley and I worked together on, the Guy Bradley Visitor Center down in Everglades National Park just opened, which is really exciting. And I think, does a lot, not to toot our horns, but I think does a lot right in terms of telling the story and also serving the needs of a visitor center, which is, hey, explore, but also explore safe. Don't try and pet the alligators. So, just
or the crocodiles.
Or the crocodiles. So I think, just kind of giving a shout out to that. So if anybody's down in the Everglades, definitely check out the Guy Bradley Visitor Center. It's an area that has an incredible human history. It has an incredible natural history, and it's got an incredible present and hopefully an incredible future.
We'll be in St. Augustine, Florida next year for the conference. So maybe some people get to the Everglades. Thank you, Scott and Halley, for being on our podcast as interpretive planners. It's good to hear kind of how you got there and what you're doing now, and all the different ways you can kind of be involved in interpretation through interpretive planning. So thank you very much. And interpreters. That's
what's up.